The ultimate injury, the deepest injury, is death. And even those injuries which are not fatal are prefigurations of death. This extreme volition, this final negation, is reflective and effective in every lesser injury. Thus all fortitude has reference to death. All fortitude stands in the presence of death. Fortitude is basically readiness to die, or more accurately, readiness to die in battle. Every injury to the natural being is fatal in its intention. Thus every courageous action has as its deepest root the readiness to die, even though, viewed from without, it may appear entirely free from any thought of death. Fortitude that does not reach down into the depths of the willingness to die is spoiled at its root and devoid of any effective power. That excerpt is from Josef Pieper's book, The Four Cardinal Virtues, and specifically it's from a chapter where he discusses fortitude, what we might also call bravery or courage today. In it, he argues that at the root of fortitude, the virtue or perfected ability to persevere in the pursuit of the good in the face of difficulty is ultimately rooted in readiness to die. It may sound pretty dark, but does he have a point? Is all bravery and courage incomplete if we're not ready to die? To answer that, first we'll need to know the answer to these two questions. First, what are the different parts of fortitude? And second, which of those parts is most important? So, to know if we really need to be ready to die, if we want to consider ourselves truly brave, we need to answer, what is fortitude? In particular, does it have different parts? Pieper answers definitively that yes, fortitude has two modes, namely attack, which is active, and endurance, which is passive. To start, let's look at attack. Another name for it is just wrath, as an anger that is justified. It is actively fighting or opposing evil, like when we see an action hero go up against the villain in your favorite Hollywood movie. As Pieper explains, the brave man not only knows how to bear inevitable evil with equanimity, he will also not hesitate to pounce upon evil and bar its way, if this can be reasonably done. This attitude requires readiness to attack, courage, self-confidence, and hope of success. The brave man uses wrath for his own act, above all an attack, for it is peculiar to wrath to pounce upon evil. Thus, fortitude and wrath work directly upon each other. In other words, for Pieper, the truly virtuous person is not simply a cold rationalist, like we might find in some Stoic or Enlightenment thought, but is actually always ready for a passionate battle, especially if evil can reasonably be defeated. However, Pieper is also clear that attack is not as important as fortitude's other mode, endurance, which answers our second question. As Pieper writes, not because, and this cannot be sufficiently stressed, patience and endurance are in themselves better and more perfect than attack and self-confidence, but because, in the world as it is constituted, it is only in the supreme test which leaves no other possibility of resistance than endurance, then the inmost and deepest strength of man reveals itself. In other words, in a world that is often full of evil powers, the individual human person at times finds themselves incapable of actively defeating evil, leaving the only option as passive resistance. Ultimately, for Pieper, this need to simply endure offers the single highest test of fortitude, because it is our only option when all else fails in the face of overwhelming evil. Further, he also explains that this harmonizes with his Christian understanding of the world. As he explains, power is so manifestly of the very structure of the world that endurance, not wrathful attack, is the ultimately decisive test of actual fortitude, which, essentially, is nothing else than to love and to realize that which is good, in the face of injury or death, and undeterred by any spirit of compromise. It is one of the fundamental laws of a world plunged into disorder by original sin that the uttermost strength of the good manifests itself in powerlessness. And the Lord's words, "Behold, I send you as sheep among wolves," continue to mark the position of the Christian in the world, even to this day. Indeed, Pieper explains that the virtue of patience, which is a sub-virtue of fortitude, and might sound like nothing much at all, is actually a critical part of true bravery. This is simply because for Pieper, patience is neither spineless nor joyless, and it is also definitively not a simple submission to every evil we face. As Pieper writes, "The patient man is not the one who does not flee from evil, but the one who does not allow himself to be made inordinately sorrowful thereby." To be patient means to preserve cheerfulness and serenity of mind in spite of injuries that result from the realization of the good. To make this a bit clearer, as a part of fortitude, the virtue of patience doesn't exclude action when appropriate, because we already know that attack is good when it can be effective. What true patience does do is rule out excessive sorrow when we face difficulties that we can't or shouldn't escape. For example, I'm sure we can all think of a friend or family member who seems to always be complaining at little inconveniences. The patient person is just the opposite. They live their life fully, ready to bear the minor difficulties of life without wallowing in self-pity. As Pieper explains, patience, therefore, is not the tear-veiled mirror of a broken life, as one might easily assume in the face of what is frequently presented and praised under this name, but the radiant embodiment of ultimate integrity. In the words of Hildegard of Bingen, patience is the pillar which nothing can soften. And Thomas, following Holy Scripture, summarizes with superb precision, through patience, man possesses his soul. Take a moment to think about that. Through patience, man possesses his soul. Pretty good line. Try to remember that next time you show up to the doctor's office 15 minutes early, only for them to be 30 minutes late. In any case, for Pieper, patience and endurance are critical to fortitude because so often we find ourselves in situations where evil or difficulties are simply more powerful than us. In those situations, our strength is not enough to directly remove the evil or difficulties we face. The only option left then is simply resisting the urge to run away. Of course, in some situations, being willing to endure evil will lead to the ultimate challenge, accepting our own death. Nothing in the natural world is a greater threat than the loss of our own lives. The highest challenge, therefore, a person can face is being willing to die for a good cause. Now we can clearly see why Pieper insisted in the opening quote that the fullness of fortitude is only found in the readiness to die. Thank you to everyone who watched to the end of the video. It really helps support the growth of this channel. We now know that there are two parts to fortitude: attack and endurance. We also know why Pieper argues that while boldly attacking evil and overcoming it is great, the greater test actually lies in endurance. Indeed, for Pieper, patience, serenity, and readiness to die for the sake of what is right, instead of being a sign of weakness, is actually the very core of fortitude. If you're interested in learning more about fortitude, I'll link a couple of other videos below. Further, I've also put a link to Pieper's book below in case you'd like to take a look. Lastly, before we call it quits for this video, let's take one more look at our opening quote. The ultimate injury, the deepest injury, is death. And even those injuries which are not fatal are prefigurations of death. This extreme volition, this final negation, is reflected and effective in every lesser injury. Thus, all fortitude has reference to death. All fortitude stands in the presence of death. Fortitude is basically readiness to die, or more accurately, readiness to die in battle. Every injury to the natural being is fatal in its intention. Thus, every courageous action has as its deepest root the readiness to die, even though, viewed from without, it may appear entirely free from any thought of death. Fortitude that does not reach down into the depths of the willingness to die is spoiled at its root and devoid of effective power. Until next time, friends.